Good morning. Chair would like to call to order this session, this workshop session of the Tennessee State Textbook Commission. Notice a lot of changes to our commission meetings. There is no more important work in our society than the education of our youth, and I'm really pleased to see the changes that have been brought about in terms of just adding some decorum and some order to this process. I think it was needed, and I greatly appreciate those that have put all these things in place. First thing we would like to do is go around and have introductions of commission members. As part of the changes, we will follow Robert's Rules of Order, and so as the chairman, we'll have to acknowledge members to speak, and so I ask you to follow those. But at this time, we'll start with Mr. Moore and just have everybody introduce themselves for our workshop this morning.
Do you want a long history or short?
Maybe just your name and what you represent on the commission. Yeah.
My name is Lewis Moore. I'm from Franklin, Tennessee.
Excuse me, Mr. Moore. You have to pick up the microphone and press the red button.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Now, can you hear me? Hey, we're going to get there. Ray, that's called Be Persistent. I'm Lewis Moore from Franklin, Tennessee. I represent a member at large from Middle Tennessee for the Book Commission, and it's a pleasure to be here and an honor to serve with Dr. Craig.
Good morning, and I'm Verna Ruffin. I am the superintendent of Jackson-Madison County School System. I represent the County Director of Schools, and it's a pleasure being on this commission.
I'm Shannon Street, and I represent 4th through 8th grade on the commission.
I'm Rebecca Wright. I'm with the Tennessee Department of Education, and I perform some of the administrative duties for the commission.
My name is Corey Conkus. I represent teachers from 9 through 12 mathematics, and I'm from West Tennessee, Covington specifically.
Thank you, commission members. Great to see everyone here this morning. At this time, item number 2, introductions of Tennessee Department of Education staff. Chair recognizes Monty Wilson, Deputy Director, Content and Resources, Tennessee Department of Education.
Good morning, Commission. This time I will just quickly introduce those that are here with the department. One of those is Ms. Rebecca Wright, who introduced herself earlier. She is with us. Myself, that you have recognized, Monty Wilson. I'm the Deputy Director of Content and Resources. And also we have with us Ms. Emily Barton, who is the Assistant Commissioner for the Division of Curriculum and Instruction with the department, and Dr. Tammy Shelton. And Tammy is the Executive Director of Content and Resources.
Item number 3 is an overview of commission meeting protocols. The chair recognizes Rebecca Wright, Policy and Communications Coordinator, Division of Curriculum and Instruction, Tennessee Department of Education.
Good morning, commission members. In your packets, you have under tab number 1 a shortened version of a summary of Robert's Rules of Order for your reference during the meeting. It starts on page 5. You also have a copy of the in brief version of Robert's Rules in front of you as well. The commission adopted Robert's Rules of Order as the administrative protocols for the commission. And as a reminder, as Chairman Hammond went through a little earlier, whenever an action item is brought before the commission, the chairman is going to recognize a member to speak on that item. There has to be a first and a second motion on each item before discussion can begin, and then there will be a vote on that item afterwards. Some items will be roll call votes, and some will be just a simple A or nay vote. If there are any questions about proper protocol or procedure during the meetings, please let us know.
Item number 4 is an update on the review process, work of the state advisory panels, and public comments for mathematics textbooks. Chair recognizes Monty Wilson, Tennessee Department of Education.
Thank you, Dr. Hammond. At this point, I'm going to briefly update you on the review process, the work of the state advisory panels, and discuss just briefly the public comments for mathematics textbooks. I'd like to draw your attention under tab 1 to page 15 in your binders. And on 15, what you have is the textbook adoption schedule for mathematics. So as part of the review process, what I wanted to make sure is that I briefed you just in terms of what has happened since the last commission meeting, where we are in the process, and then, of course, take any questions you might have. The last meeting on this document was March 17th of 2014. So since then, we've had, needless to say, several key dates that have occurred with the review process. The weekend of May 3rd and 4th began the process for the textbook reviewers on the advisory panel. That weekend, they received training on how to begin to evaluate textbooks. They spent both days, we were at Gaylord Opryland Hotel, where they received the training over a 2-day period just in regards to Section 1 of the review instrument. After that weekend, we actually came together again the following weekend, which was May 10th. And at that point, the publishers had the opportunity to speak to all the advisory panelists in regards to their product. That process allows publishers, by the number of bids that were submitted, to have so many minutes to speak to the advisory panelist members and discuss what books, what resources, whether they be digital, whether they be print, were available for the review. So that was the second weekend. And once that had occurred, our reviewers actually began work in terms of reviewing the textbooks. May 19th was the deadline to receive those textbooks. My understanding is that pretty much every publisher that bid had those prior to that in the hands of the reviewers. And the reviewers began to work, as I said, at that point, and worked independently through June 16th. And on June 16th, you will notice that they came together at that point to really debrief and to begin to complete their Section 1 reviews. And that weekend was spent reviewing Section 1, which was the items that were considered the non-negotiables of the rubric, and they submitted those reviews that weekend. Also that weekend, we trained the reviewers on Section 2 of the screening instrument so they could begin the second phase of the review process. For books that passed Section 1, reviewers immediately began to review for Section 2. If there were books or resources that did not meet all the non-negotiables for Section 1, we, of course, notified those publishers of the shortcomings based on the reviewers' comments and their ratings, and publishers then had an amount of time to where they could choose to either resubmit materials, showing that they've taken those recommendations or those comments from the commission or from the reviewers in stride to make changes, or they could actually withdraw their bid at that point in time. We had one company that withdrew their entire bid. So if you've looked at the bid documents carefully, you will notice that Edgenuity is a company that, after receiving the reviews, decided they no longer wanted to participate. So they withdrew their bid entirely. We also had some publishers withdraw just certain titles within their bid. Not everything, but certain books. So the bid listing is a little different than what it was when it was recognized by the commission back in March, and that's why. On August 8th, on July 29th, that revised list minus some of those drop titles was presented at the State Board of Education meeting. And then the next date is August 8th, and at that point, that was the deadline for written responses to reviews from Section 1. So publishers at that point had to submit something in writing saying how they were going to address those concerns. Then on the weekend of August 23rd and 24th, The review members, the advisory panel came back. That morning we heard, into the early afternoon, we actually heard the publishers were allowed to come back and speak to the advisory panel review committee and say, here are the changes we've made, here's what we've done based on your comments. And they were able to also submit new materials at that point in time. So the reviewers heard from the publishers directly, if the publishers so decided they wanted to speak. The reviewers got the new content and materials, and they began a re-review of Section 1. At that same time that weekend, Section 2 reviews were also being completed because some textbooks had passed that Section 1. At that point in time, because there were so many re-reviews, some of the reviewers said, we need extra time. We can't get this done this weekend, which makes sense. We wanted to make sure the publishers had a fair review. So we extended that date to complete Section 1 and Section 2, and we communicated that with those individual publishers where reviewers needed extra time. At that point in time, we did get final reviews, the re-reviews, and the Section 2 reviews if they were made available to all publishers. And at this point in time, we are up to date with September 22nd, which is our textbook commission meeting date. So that, very briefly, is an update on the review process, and it also encompasses the work of the state advisory panels and panelists up to this point in time. Which were the two things I wanted to discuss. The third can be very brief. In terms of public comments for mathematics textbooks, we at the department have not received any at this point in time. The public, of course, has the opportunity at any point in time to complete a review and to submit feedback that is sent to the department. If that feedback was received by July 15th, we were required to share that with publishers, and that was to be considered in part of the review process. We had none at that point in time, and as of this past Friday, we also had no public comments. So that's the reason you do not have any of those in your packet. At this point in time, I would be more than happy to answer any questions any of you have in regards to the topics I discussed at this point, which is the review process, the work of those advisory panel members, or any comments you have about the lack of public comments at this point in time.
Does anyone have any questions or comments for Mr. Wilson? Any commission members? So just in summary, no public comments on the math?
No, we did not have any public comments. We, of course, have at this point in time the 10 different collection sites or depositories across the state. The math textbooks are there for review. At those review sites, we have both a paper copy and there's an electronic feedback option available that would come straight to the department. And at this point, we have not had any reviews submitted by the public, either in writing or electronically.
Okay, and it's also as part of this process, publishers were notified of the initial review and were given the opportunity to interact with reviewers and had time to be able to make changes to their proposed books.
Correct. The publisher's initial meeting was that May 10th meeting, which was the initial meeting of here's the product. They received their reviews the week of June 17th, 16th, 17th. Once those were processed, because those were done electronically, once those were processed, we shared those with the publishers, so they had that information. And within our communications with them, they were told, here are your options at this point if you did not pass Section 1. And that included they did have permission to withdraw their bid, or they had the ability to resubmit at that point, which would include adding to or taking away from their textbooks in regards to content in order to meet those recommendations or those comments from the reviewers. So they did not have, needless to say, an extended period amount of time when you look at publishing a textbook. They had a little over, I believe it was between 4 and not quite 6 weeks. So on behalf of the publishers, I can state that they did the best they could in regards to making some content changes, because that would be very difficult to turn around in such a short period of time. Then, of course, they did share those changes with the panelists, the review committee, and they were able to speak to those reviewers, and that occurred on August 23rd.
Any other questions from commission members? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, item 5 is math textbooks review process. The chair recognizes Emily Barton, Assistant Commissioner, Division of Curriculum and Instruction, Tennessee Department of Education.
Good morning, Chairman and Commission members. Thank you for the work that you all do. Following on Monty Wilson's explanation of the specifics of the process, I wanted to share just 3 of the high-level changes to this process that came about this year. The textbook review process is outlined and approved by this commission, and this math textbook review process was voted on and approved of by the textbook commission last fall. There were 3 priorities for changes to the process. One was to ensure that there is a clear and high bar for expectations for what the products would produce. We know that districts look to the commission for options, but they expect all of those options to be quality options that will meet the standards, which is what the commission is charged with reviewing for. This process went to great lengths to ensure that the clarity of the expectations for those products was very strong. As you know from the rubric review, there are non-negotiable elements and there are additional criteria. On January 24th, there was a pre-conference hearing. There was pre-bid conference, and all publishers that have bid on any book series in the past were invited to attend, and they were expressly invited to bring content staff, knowing that we would go into detail around the expectations for mathematics in that rubric. It was a full-day meeting, and throughout that day we went through every aspect of the rubric and made very clear that the non-negotiables were in fact non-negotiable. That was voted on and approved by this commission. The second change to the review process is an effort to ensure that the process allows for a fair and collaborative communication with all publishers. The effort to allow the sharing of feedback and the opportunity to make revisions is a unique process element, both unique in Tennessee's history and unique among states. And it comes from a deep belief that we must work together productively and that feedback is healthy and helpful. So if we have a non-negotiable review with a high bar for expectation, it is only also fair that we share feedback and provide the opportunity for changes during that process. This is not a simple thumbs up, thumbs down vote. This is a process where we are together working to provide high quality options to schools and districts. Finally, we wanted to ensure that the process was open to competition and visibly open to the public. So in the past, there have been requirements in the process that have restricted the number of proposals that have been received, and the Commission over the past few years has gone to great effort to ensure that there are more publishers that are able to participate in that process and that districts have the opportunity to also put forth any district-created tools and resources as part of the review process. This process has been managed with great care and upfront and clear communication throughout. There is also, in Tennessee state law, a waiver option for districts who do not have choices that they find appropriate to their community as a result of this. And that waiver process is open to all districts for every review. Finally, I would just say that the textbook reviewers that you as a commission have commissioned to ensure that the review is done well responded with 100% strongly agree that they felt comfortable reviewing for this rubric. They were trained in depth on the content expectations. They were selected based on materials available to you that required active review of curricular materials, and the textbook reviewers with 100% claimed that they felt comfortable reviewing against the rubric. Thank you for allowing me to share some of these changes.
Any questions for Ms. Barton? Do you happen to know, you mentioned that other states don't allow the feedback and revision process. What do you have more information on that? Or?
I don't have a state-by-state analysis, and many states do the review at the district level without a state-level process. However, I do know from comments made by publishers that this is a different way of going about things, and it comes from a deep belief that we do need to work together in order to ensure that we have a high-quality product, but that the Commission's responsibility is to ensure that that bar is clear and held, and to structure a process that allows for the valuable use of feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is 6, overview of agenda for September 22nd meeting. Chair recognizes Rebecca Wright, Tennessee Department of Education.
If you all will turn in your packets to page number 31, the agenda for the September 22nd meeting, which will be starting at 10:15 this morning. Just a little bit of context. So beginning this year, we started having workshop meetings for the commission. The purpose of this time is to go through the agenda items and to answer any questions or have any discussion on any items that you would like more information about. Since this is a workshop and not a meeting, there cannot be any deliberation during this time, but it is an opportunity for you all to get more context and clarification if you would like to have additional information before moving on and taking the action during the meeting. So just to begin, you have the call to order, roll call, and introductions of new members at the beginning so that you all will be introduced into the record. Then the action items are the adoption of the agenda. Each meeting, the agenda has to be formally adopted. The minutes from the April the 9th meeting will be approved or is on the action item list. And then item number 3 is a list of revisions to textbook commission rules and policies. So in April 2014, the state legislature passed a new bill that affected and changed a lot of the textbook laws. And so the department, in consultation with the chairman of the commission, has conducted a review of all commission policies and rules and made revisions to those policies and rules to align with that new state legislation. That legislation will go into effect January 1st, 2015. We also use this as an opportunity to update any old and outdated policies and rules and clean up and add more context where necessary. So that is the list of the complete policies and rules, and these are commission rules and policies that you all vote on and can make changes to. So the first one is just is the actual rule. B through H are each policies. And then item number 4 is the revised textbook adoption cycle, and Mr. Wilson will be presenting that at the meeting and providing more context there, and can answer any questions you all have about that item. And then later on, we will be having an overview of the advisory panel recommendations, which are all in your packets, and then we will break for lunch, followed by presentations from the publishers on their comments for the mathematics textbooks. And then finally, we'll have a state advisory panelist who will be coming and giving kind of the overview of their role and the work that the panelists have been doing this past year. And then we will adjourn. And I'll pause here for any questions about the meeting agenda items for today.
Any questions for Mrs. Wright? How'd you kind of summarize that a lot of these changes are in accordance with the state law taking effect at the start of the year? And so this meeting and all others are live streamed. The resources for this meeting are all available online on the Tennessee Department of Education website. So many positive changes to make the process more transparent and much more organized than maybe in the past.
Okay. And then on page 33, you all have the workshop agenda for the October the 6th meeting. We'll just begin by an overview of the preparation protocols. And as the chairman mentioned, we have been working to improve the process leading up to the commission meeting. So we now have kind of a schedule of events leading up to the meetings for when you all will receive your materials as commission members, when the materials will be available online, and when the agendas will be posted on the Textbook Services website. We have a series of updates, including the progress towards implementing the 2014 textbook legislation, the status of the 2015 Textbook Commission appointments, the 2015 State Advisory Panelist recruitment, and then the Master Textbook Annual Calendar. That calendar is just the master copy, which we will use then to create the schedule for each year, and that schedule is an action item that you all will be approving at the October 6th meeting for the next cycle. And then item number 6 is the revised waiver protocol and update on district waivers. We have been doing some work at the department to clean up the waiver process and make it more simple and understandable for districts to be able to use and understand. Item number 7 is a simple overview of the publisher communications and documents that will be sent out. That includes the intent to bid items as well as the invitation to bid documents. And then item number 8 is simply an overview of the commission meeting items for October the 6th. At the October the 6th meeting, you all will be voting on the list that you will be recommending to the State Board of Education for the list of mathematics textbooks. You will also be voting on the actual calendar for the textbook adoption schedule for next year.
Any questions or comments from commission members? Okay, our workshop is concluded at this time, unless there's any other business or questions. We will call the official meeting at 10:15 to order. So that'll be at about an hour and 15 minutes. Thank you. Good morning. I'll call this session of the State Textbook Commission to order at this time. Welcome this morning. The Commission acknowledges that the education of our youth in the state is the most important function of our society, and along with that, the selection of resources, therefore, that teachers will use is very, very important. And so we approach all of our tasks and items very seriously, and look forward to this meeting today. All the materials that will be discussed in the meeting are available online at the department website under textbook services, that anyone could look at the resources that we're reviewing and speaking of here. It's all online. Also, this meeting is being live streamed in accordance with a law that will take place January 1st. The department has gone ahead and put in many of the things that are prescribed by this new law, including meeting here, including being live streamed, putting into place organizational protocol that we'll be following Robert's rules. And so we reviewed this a few moments ago in our workshop, which is also new. We have a workshop to review items that will be discussed in the meetings before the meetings. Also, those are live streamed as well. But anyhow, the chairman will recognize members to speak, and so we'll be following Robert's rules throughout this meeting and in all future meetings. We want to acknowledge one commission member who's on his way here for the session, but is traveling up from Chattanooga. Jason Robinson is online. Jason, are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay. Thank you. And at this time, we'll have the roll call. Rebecca Wright, Policy and Communications Coordinator, Division of Curriculum Instruction from the Department of Education, will do our roll call.
Dr. Verna Ruffin, Ms. Shannon Street, here. Mr. Corey Conkis, here. Dr. Jason Robinson,
here.
Mr. Lewis Moore, here. Mr. Kevin Huffman, Dr. Craig Hammond.
Here.
You have 6 members present.
Thank you.
And there is a quorum.
There is a quorum. Thank you. I'd like to introduce our new commission members. These commission members were trained this past Sunday, and it's great to meet you this morning in our workshop and to have you on board with us. First, we have to my right Dr. Verna Ruffin, and she's Director of Schools in Jackson, Tennessee. She's the representative of West for the County Director of Schools. Next to my right, we have Shannon Street, who is our Middle Tennessee teacher representative from Cannon County. And to my left, Corey Conkis is a teacher from West Tennessee, and he's our representative from there, from Covington High School. Right. Welcome. Glad to have you all. We're going to begin with our action items, and there's one to add before we start with what's printed there on the agenda, and that is, I mentioned earlier that we really want to follow the proper protocol for this meeting and all textbook commission meetings, and part of that is for us to have someone performing secretary duties. And on the commission, it states, the law states that Commissioner Huffman is the secretary of the commission. He's not able to be with us today. And so we would like to elect Rebecca Wright from the department to perform secretarial duties for the commission, and this is for a non-voting. She would be serving in a non-voting capacity. So here to perform the secretarial duties for the commission. If there are no questions, or if there are questions, we can hear a motion for this added. First of all, is there a motion to add this to the agenda, the election of Rebecca Wright? Okay. Is there a second? Okay. Okay. If you would add the motion on the microphone.
Verna Ruffin, I would like to add the motion that we do add this to the agenda.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, so the motion carries. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, so that motion carries, and Rebecca Wright will perform secretarial duties in a non-voting capacity to the commission. Okay, the second action item now, the first on the agenda, is the adoption of the agenda. And Rebecca Wright, Tennessee Department of Education, will speak to the agenda.
Members in your packet, Rebecca Wright, Tennessee Department of Education. Members in your packet on page 91 is the agenda for the September 22nd meeting. This vote is to approve all of the items on the agenda, including the action items listed on page 91.
And do we have a motion for the approval of the agenda for today, September 22nd?
A motion to approve the agenda for today.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the agenda is approved. Okay, action item 2 on the agenda is the April 9th, 2014 meeting minutes. And the chair recognizes Rebecca Wright.
Rebecca Wright, Tennessee Department of Education. Members in your packet on page 93 are the minutes from the April 9th regular meeting of the State Textbook Commission.
Can you specify where those are located?
On page 93 under tab 3.
And any member can move to approve the meeting minutes from April 9.
Corey Conkus, motion to approve the minutes from April 9th.
Shannon Street, second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the April 9th meeting minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is Textbook Commission Rules and Policies First Read. And Rebecca Wright from the department will summarize our Textbook Commission rules and policies at this time. Okay. Before we look at the rules and policies, is there a motion that we discuss this item? Commission rules and policies first read.
Verna Ruffin, I make a motion that we discuss our textbook commission rules and policies.
Thank you. Any second?
Corey Conkus, second.
All approved, say aye. Okay, I think we're approved to discuss or to hear. Okay. So the purpose of that was to bring the item before the commission officially.
Members, in your packets on tab number 4, beginning on page 101, the purpose of this item is to bring changes to the rules and policies of the State Textbook Commission. These changes are to align the rules and policies with the legislation that was passed this past spring in April 2014 by the Tennessee General Assembly. These policies will be heard on both first and second read. So the policies before you will be voting on them on first read during this meeting and then second read in the October 6th meeting, and they will become finalized after the final read, the second read on October the 6th, if they are approved. The policies have been updated to align with the new legislation, as well as to make additional general updates and clean up some of the older language that had been passed several years ago that needed to be revised accordingly. Before you, you have policy 1100, which are the objectives of the state review and instructional materials process. That is a policy. You also have the rules beginning on page 103. All of the changes to the commission rules are in tracked changes so that you can see what changes were made to the existing rule. Beginning on page 109 is an actual clean copy of the rules without the track changes so that you can read it without having to go line by line with the track changes. On page 114 are the objectives of the state textbook and review and instructional materials review process. Again, the changes are noted in track change. On page 115 is the responsibilities of the commission policy. Page 117 are the policies and procedures for free materials and samples. And again, the changes are in track change to that policy as well. Beginning on page 120 are the additional clarifications for the free materials policy. Page 124 is the publisher's policy. Page 126 are the Textbook Commission meetings policies. And page 129 are the rules of order. Lastly, on page 131 is the Publisher Corrective Action Plan policy. These are all the policies and rules that are before you on first read.
If any of the commission members have any questions, it would be good to take these at this time. Rebecca, what are some of the more significant changes to the rules and policies? If you could kind of point those out to us, I think that would be helpful before we approve or vote to potentially approve first read.
So I'll begin with the rules on page, let's see here. So on page 104 and 105, the samples rule was changed because there was a significant change within the state legislation to define when samples had to be submitted, as well as making sure that there's a new requirement that all samples be available online for public access. So those pieces were added into the rule to allow for online access of all samples submitted. And then on page 106 of the rules, the new legislation requires a corrective action plan for publishers that they have to submit if there are any that they guarantee to correct any factual and editing errors found. So that was added into the rule as well. There is a new policy for that, and that's the very last policy that I mentioned. It is on page 131 is the policy that aligns with that rule. We also added all of the online access to sample textbooks has also been fleshed out in rules and the process through which publishers would follow to make those materials available. That's on page 110. And then on page 124, the timeline that publishers have to present their comments to the review panels as well as to the commission have been updated on page 124 of the policy. We also created new commission meeting protocols and rules of order beginning on page 126 through 129, and those were created the commission has created those in collaboration with the chairman of the commission. And one other point of order, or one other point that I want to mention, going back to the rules on page 106, the state legislation changed the maximum amount of the publisher bond. This has been updated in the rules to reflect that it will be a one amount. It will be $10,000 for all publishers, regardless of the number of books bid. So there'll just be one flat bond amount, as opposed to the individual bond amounts that were determined based on the number of books bid. And that's it. Those are the major changes.
Do any commission members have questions about any of those changes before we will do a roll call vote on this?
Ms. Wright, page 105, the top of the page there, could you explain what that paragraph 2 means?
Mr. Moore, I'm going to recognize you to speak, and if you could come over the microphone with that question.
Do what now?
Can you ask that question again? You're
okay. Yes. This is Louis Moore, and it's the question regarding page 105 at the top of the page, item 2. It talks about the content, including pictures and graphs of the textbooks, instruction materials, supplementary materials that are made available online. Inspection shall be in finished form and shall have the same as what would be distributed to the public. However, the format does not have to be in finished form. I wasn't really sure what that was meaning.
Okay, Rebecca Wright.
That basically means that the content of all of the samples that are posted online has to be in final form, but sometimes publishers are still working on the actual platform that they're going to be using. So they may make changes to the platform as long as the public still has access to those samples during that entire process. But all of the content does have to be in final form.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments by commission members? Okay, I'm going to ask Mrs. Wright, the chair asked Mr. Wright to do a roll call vote on this for approval of first read.
Dr. Ruffin?
If you would, please, on the mic.
Yes.
Ms. Shannon Street?
Yes.
Mr. Corey Conkus?
Yes.
Dr. Jason Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Louis Moore?
Yes.
Chairman Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 ayes.
Thank you. That motion passes. Item number 4 on our agenda is the revised textbook adoption cycle. Chair recognizes Monty Wilson, Deputy Director, Content and Resources, Tennessee Department of Education.
Good morning. At this time, I would like to direct you in your notebooks to Section 5.
Okay, so that this item is properly before the commission, if someone on the commission would like to make a motion to hear this item.
Shannon Street, I make a motion to hear this item on the revised textbook adoption cycle.
Corey Conkis, second.
No vote. Okay. Mr. Wilson,
All right,
thank you.
thank you. If you would turn, please, to Section 5 in your notebooks, you will see that at this point we're going to, I'm going to discuss briefly the revised textbook adoption cycle. The department had received questions and concerns regarding the adoption cycle, several areas to look at, and upon the questions and concerns that we received, we this spring made a decision to have a focus group of educators from across the state of Tennessee come together and look at making recommended changes to our current textbook adoption cycle. If you look on page 133, it outlines some of how that work was done. On May 13th of 2014, via the director's update, which is sent to every director in Tennessee, we had a call for any educators who wanted to be a part of this focus group that they could join. We also advertised that in some other areas as well beside the director's update, and we had a very short application process for those that wished to be a part of this focus group. And we ended up having, I believe it was 13 educators from across Tennessee who were allowed to participate after contacting us in that textbook focus group. And those educators ranged from classroom teacher all the way up to directors of school. It included supervisors of instruction, both in academic and CTE areas. It was actually a very thoughtful group of educators who were looking at doing what they believed is best for students in terms of preparing resources. We met this summer here in Nashville, and after much discussion, they made several proposals for us to take back and have several different people look at. Each of the individuals on the focus group were allowed to share the draft with people they worked with in their district and in their region to just get another set of eyes on it, to say, what do you think? Do you see anything else that needs to be changed? And then internally within the department, we realized we need to make sure that we ran certain questions or concerns or things that were being looked at and discussed by certain divisions. So we made sure that the Division of Curriculum Instruction, the Division of Special Populations, and the Division of Career and Technical Education look very closely at the proposal for a revised textbook adoption cycle. After everybody had a chance to look at it, we had a conference call this summer as well to say, here are the comments that we received. Can we have a final recommendation for you today here with the Commission for a revised textbook adoption cycle? And if you turn to page 137, just a couple pages over, you will see the work of so many educators in Tennessee. This is the proposed new textbook adoption cycle. It does still include, is a 6-year cycle, which we currently use, so that has not changed. The changes themselves, and you can compare to what we currently have on page 135, But the changes mostly revolve around making sure that we have correct alignment within the different curriculum and instruction pieces that would be adopted each year. We also make sure that we are able to meet the curriculum deadline to make sure that the standards for those curriculum areas are up to date. There's been quite a few standards changes in different content areas, and we want to make sure that publishers have the correct standards and so they are able to produce and bid a textbook that aligns to our state standards. So that was something we looked at as well. At this time, the recommendation from the Tennessee Department of Education would be that you adopt the proposed new textbook adoption cycle that is presented before you on page 137. At this point in time, I'm more than willing and happy to answer any questions that any of the commissioners may have about either the process or the adoption cycle itself.
So, Mr. Wilson, we're currently in the math adoption, so the next one we would be rolling back up to A and going down in that order, correct?
Correct, yes. We looked at, currently our section numbers our section column would be by numbers, and we didn't want to confuse anybody by staying with numbers, so we went to an alphabetical. But yes, currently we are in the math adoption process, and with that being a 6-year process, we would start with section A for next year, and then we would cycle all the way through to section F, which in 6 years would be math. That would be up again. So yes, you are correct, Dr. Hammond.
Other questions for Mr. Wilson? On this one, we'll do a roll call vote as well. Chair recognizes Ms. Wright to do the roll call.
Dr. Ruffin?
Yay.
Ms. Shannon Street?
Yes.
Mr. Corey Conkus?
Aye.
Dr. Jason Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis Moore?
Yes.
And Chairman Hammond?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, you have 6 ayes.
Okay, so that motion carries. Okay, we're at the presentations portion of the agenda. Okay, the chair recognizes Monty Wilson again, Tennessee Department of Education. This is the overview of advisory panel recommendations for math textbooks.
At this time, I would like to direct the Commission's attention to tab 6 in their folders. Behind tab 6, you will find a review for all of the textbooks that are currently being bid for mathematics, the current adoption cycle. As mentioned earlier in the work session, we have followed a schedule which was approved by the Textbook Commission, and at this point the reviews have been finalized for both Section 1 and Section 2. Section 1 being the non-negotiables, which focused on rigor metrics and focus metrics, and Section 2, which was designed to follow alignment metrics, coherence metrics, and usability metrics. Reviewers throughout the summer conducted the reviews on math textbooks, and we followed the dates that were approved in terms of having the reviewer submit those reviews on time and in a timely fashion, and then us sharing those reviews with publishers along the way, so they were kept in the loop in terms of where their textbooks were in terms of the review process. Section 1 is every textbook has a review for Section 1. One of the things I want to make sure is that you understand if there is a a title or a series that does not have a Section 2 review, that would be due to the fact that Section 1 did not pass. If a textbook or instructional resource did not pass Section 1, the rubric was designed so that the reviewers were not to move forward with Section 2. So there will be some reviews in Tab 6 that look like they're only a partial review. The reason is not that the reviewers did not do their job, it's that they were not allowed to move forward with Section 2 due to the fact that all of the non-negotiables in Section 1 were not met. For example, if you look at page 141, 42, and 43, this is one of the reviews for one of the textbook bands that was reviewed by publishers. And if you look on page 142, underneath the first box, there's a question that says, were both non-negotiables in Section 1 met? And that says yes. That yes means that there should be a Section 2 review that follows, which in this case it does. There are reviews for the alignment metrics, the coherence metrics, and the usability metrics. If that said no, for example, that would be the end of the review for that textbook. I wanted to make sure that that did not confuse any of the commission members as they were looking at the reviews from the advisory panel. Those Section 1 reviews were completed in June. In July, the reviewers had started to work on Section 2 for those books that passed. As I mentioned in the work session, publishers were allowed to resubmit and did so in August. And in those instances, the reviewers went back to complete a re-review of Section 1. And then if it passed with a re-review, which some titles and series did, they continued with Section 2. Excuse me. At this point in time, as I mentioned earlier, this Section 6 in your folders does include all of the reviews for the series that are currently, textbook and series that are currently still being bid through the mathematics textbook adoption cycle. It does not include any reviews for titles that have been withdrawn, because any title from either an entire publisher or from a publisher, just an individual title, those have not been included at this point in time because the publisher has said these textbooks or resources at this time are no longer a part of our bid. So those reviews are not included. At this time, if the commission has any questions or concerns regarding the panel recommendations, I will be more than willing and happy to try and answer your questions to the best of my ability.
Any questions for Mr. Wilson? Okay, Chair recognizes Dr. Rupp.
I have one question in the alignment matrix. When the rating was less than a 2, were publishers then given an opportunity to go back and to revise?
Actually, what we have done, and we're in the process of receiving these, when the textbook commission approved that timeline, because we had not had a process like this before, there was nothing built in to respond to Section 2. Several publishers pointed that out to us. We went back and reviewed, and we said, yes, the publishers are correct. So I met with my supervisors within the department, and we immediately decided to allow publishers to respond to Section 2 reviews. And what we're in the process of doing is compiling their comments to Section 2. We're going to provide that back to the reviewers and also to yourself. At the time of this, it was not available because we were just made aware of the fact that publishers were not awarded that ability to respond. So in addition to the reviews, and I apologize, I should have mentioned this, thank you for asking that question, you will be receiving copies of the publisher responses to Section 2. We should have those available for you hopefully electronically tomorrow. They had through the end of last week to get those in. Some of those came in this weekend, and needless to say, I'm not in my office to have that information ready for you at this moment. But we will have that for you and for the reviewers as well. Those will end up being included as part of the official review, which of course are made public on our website.
Other questions for Mr. Wilson? Okay. Chair recognizes Mr. Conkus.
Mr. Wilson, my question is for the high school textbook reviews. I noticed in the high school portion, a lot of these textbook titles are kind of grade banded with Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. And I wonder if publishers were allowed to, if that was a grade band that they specifically had to meet all of those, or if they could just do an Algebra 1 title or an Algebra 2 title or a Geometry title.
They could have done that independently. They were reviewed independently. Some publishers, for example, you will see there are some publishers that just bid an algebra book and chose not to bid geometry or algebra 2. It was not required that they had to submit a bid that covered all three of those courses that are grade banded as Common Core classrooms or courses that have an EOC testing. In terms of the review, the reviewers looked at all three because they needed to look at that vertical alignment, which is part of the rubric, the screening instrument that was included. They also, those reviewers also looked at the integrated math, which is integrated 1, 2, and 3. So for some titles, you will see, for example, you might see Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. And for others, such as on page 243, for textbook title, you will see that it's listed as integrated 1, 2, and 3. That particular publisher, for example, they chose not to bid textbooks for algebra, geometry, and algebra 2. They just went the integrated route. The reviewers, as they reviewed those books independently as an algebra book, as a geometry, and as an algebra 2. And what was done with the reviews for Section 1 and Section 2 is if there was a specific concern for the algebra book, that was listed in the note section so that those comments would be specific to that one course, and publishers weren't left to try and guess, well, what do they mean here? I hope that answers your question.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson. In announcements and notices on our agenda, reminder of October 6th regular meeting. Chair recognizes Rebecca Wright.
Members, under tab 3 of your packets on page 89, tab 3, page 89, is the agenda for the October 6th meeting. The meeting will be held here at Legislative Plaza at 12:30 p.m. In room 16, so we will be in a different room. Note that we also have a workshop that precedes that meeting as well. The action items that will be on your agenda for the October the 6th meeting include the adoption of the agenda, approval of the meeting minutes for the September 22nd meeting. You will be voting on the list of math textbooks to recommend to the State Board of Education. You'll also be voting on the 2014-16 textbook adoption schedule, and that will be for computer science, tech engineering, and instructional technology based on the new cycle that you all just approved. You will also be voting on final read of the Commission rules and policies. And finally, the publisher agreement, which is the new agreement that we discussed that is now required in the new state legislation that passed in spring 2014. And among other things, it includes that publishers will submit corrective action plans to correct any factual errors that are found within textbooks.
Thank you. Textbook lead sessions. Chair recognizes Monty Wilson.
Yes, on the behalf of the Tennessee Department of Education, we wanted to make the Textbook Commission aware that we have the State Department of Education's LEAD conference, which is upcoming. It is October 27th to 29th. This professional development opportunity for educators that is put on by the department has several different objectives, one of which, of course, is to update educators as to changes that may be occurring. The Office of Textbook Services in the past has always taken an opportunity at the lead conference to meet with textbook coordinators or anybody interested about the process or what may be happening. There was normally one session. In my former role, attended that before so that I knew what was happening with textbook services. This year, we wanted to inform you that we are taking a very proactive approach. We feel that we need to be as transparent, as informative as possible with all educators in Tennessee. So this year, we are not having just one session in regards to textbook at LEAD. We will actually have 3 different sessions for educators to attend, which is more than we have ever offered before. The purpose of that is so that we can make sure that our educators across the state understand the changes that have occurred and where we are in the process of providing textbooks and instructional resources for our teachers and students in Tennessee. We've designed those 3 sessions so they meet almost 3 different sets of audience members, and we're going to put those in a track so that they can be followed to make the most sense for people that want to follow and attend all 3 sessions. The first session, Mrs. Wright will be leading as the lead presenter, and it will focus on many and all of the policy changes that have occurred via legislation or how they impact both your job as textbook commissioners, but also how that trickles down and affects local school districts. So that would be the first session offered. The second session I would be the main facilitator for, and at that point we're going to take a look at a yearly adoption schedule process from almost a generic perspective. These are the steps that will be occurring at the state level with the commission and how that affects you at the district level and what that looks like month to month and how it impacts them. The third and final session I would also be the lead facilitator for, and at that point it would very much be for the textbook coordinators in the school districts, because it's going to very much roll out to them their responsibility in terms of paperwork and forms at the local level. We are going through, and upon my arrival this year in this role with the department, we are looking at every single form, every single process we have, making sure we update those, they're up to date and they're current, and any changes that need to be made, that we address those. So it's going to be very beneficial for textbook coordinators to get that information and, of course, be willing to ask questions about any changes that may be occurring. We wanted you to know what was happening so that if you got questions or concerns from anyone between now and then from the district level, particularly, that you could share with them that those sessions will be offered at LEAD. Needless to say, for those that can attend, we're going to have information for them as well via email to keep them updated about things that are vital and important at the district level so that they have the information they need also. Do you have any questions about our plans to help communicate and inform our educators in Tennessee? I'd be happy to answer those questions.
Dr. Ruffin?
Just a comment, Mr. Wilson, and that's to thank you and the Tennessee Department of Ed for taking that proactive approach in communicating this. I think this is such an important piece that we understand the process and we understand that we're putting rigor and real focus on selections and on communicating. That's such a huge piece of the progress, and I'd just like you to know that I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Okay, at this time we're going to recess for lunch, and we will pick back up at 12:15 with some presentations around the math adoption. We're going to recess at this time. See you at 12:15.
say a state board meeting in a bigger room. That's when I came before. Oh, hey, you're fine. No, we're just looking at the schedule. You're perfectly fine. Okay.
All right, good afternoon. It's 12:15 and time to resume our meeting today. And we're going to begin with agenda item 6, which is under presentations on the agenda. We're going to hear presentations from different individuals about our math textbook adoption cycle. And first will be review of math textbook state review process, or reviewing the process. Chair recognizes Monty Wilson. When you come up, if you would state your name and who you represent.
Yes, Monty Wilson, Tennessee Department of Education, Division of Curriculum and Instruction. At this point, we will very soon hear from publishers that have requested to speak. As part of the review process, publishers have multiple opportunities to speak to different individuals. That starts in May. When the reviewers start their process, they're allowed to come and speak to the reviewers in regards to the bids that they have submitted, to where they can share their resources, how to access those if they're electronically, explain those. During the process that we had for the math adoption, they also were allowed to speak to the textbook reviewers on August 23rd to offer their comments in response to the Section 1 reviews. As part of the process for the adoption of any textbooks, including mathematics, which is what we're currently in with the cycle, they are allowed to speak to you as the commissioners of the textbook commission in regards to anything they feel like needs either clarification or any comments they feel like that you need in order to make a decision. Those comments are timed per the policy that we have. So publishers requested through our office whether they wanted to speak or not, and they are allowed so many minutes per the title's bid. And I believe that Ms. Wright will be timing those individuals today that are speaking. Needless to say, there are multiple publishers, for whatever reason, who have decided not to speak today. That's their choice. We don't require that. You as a commission do not require that. It is purely optional. In fact, one of the publishers who had originally asked to speak, who were on your list today, emailed earlier today and said they decided not to come for whatever reason. That's totally their decision. But this time is reserved for them to speak to you, and then, of course, after that, as the chair of the commission, you can ask questions or have commission members ask questions if they so choose. Does anyone have any questions in regard to the purpose or the procedure in terms of publishers speaking today or throughout the whole process that I can answer. Okay.
If you could give your name and who you represent, and on our agenda or on what we've been provided, Scott Forsman. Are you filling in for Scott, or?
I'm Phil Hester.
That's what I
Scott
thought.
Forsman is the K-6 Elementary Division of Pearson Education.
Okay.
So the first comments we make to you will be centered around our Envision Math K-6 elementary program that was submitted for state approval.
Okay, K-6, okay. And this is 20 minutes is what we have on here, and so Rebecca's going to keep time.
Thanks, Craig. Dr. Hammonds, distinguished commission members, it's an honor to appear in front of you today to talk about our books, some of which have been approved in both Section 1 and Section 2. Some have been approved in Section 1 only. First of all, we want to thank the teacher reviewers for their extensive work that they did this summer. I can only imagine the countless hours that they spent literally reviewing thousands of textbooks that were submitted in Tennessee. We have two people that will be addressing the commission today, and then we'll try to save time at the end for your questions. First of all, Dr. Sue Tower, who is in charge of all product development in mathematics, operates out of our Boston office. Dr. Skip Fennell, who will be our first speaker. I'll let him introduce himself and give you his credentials. One of the actual framers of the Common Core state standards from the ground up. Past National Council of Teachers of Mathematics president. Worked with teachers in Tennessee extensively over the last 3 or 4 years, nationwide and worldwide. The packet that you have in front of you is just some backup information because we know you'll have a 2-week deliberation period in between this meeting and the October 6th meeting. We're not questioning the process. We just have some interesting information that we want to focus around the scoring rubric per se, the independent third-party company that initially developed the rubric, and they've recently revised the rubric and made significant changes to it in August of this year, right in the middle of the textbook evaluation process. So that will be the emphasis of our presentation today. Dr. Fennell.
Good afternoon. I come to you as Phil said. First of all, I hate long introductions. I was ready to sit him down as he got through part of that, but figured that would be bad protocol. But I do have a history of working with standards in lots of contexts, and so I'll be waving stuff at you just for perspective. And I suspect actually my role here is really to look at perspective relative to the process. And so only for background, 14 years ago, closing on 15, the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics created the Principles and Standards for School Mathematics. I happen to be one of the writers of that document. In 2008, some of you will, I'm sure, be familiar with the National Mathematics Advisory Panel under then President Bush. I happen to be a member of that panel and actually chaired the Content Review Committee. In 2006, while serving as president of the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, we created the NCTM Curriculum Focal Points, which sort of gave rise to the issue of focus that guides lots of reviews relative to curriculum materials around this country. I was a writer of those materials as well. The Common Core State Standards for School Mathematics, as you're well aware, were released in 2010. From 2008 until 2010 and actually onward, I served as a writer of the Common Core. This very tattered version is the one I kind of carry with me because I reference it every day in lots of contexts. perhaps more importantly than that, or equally importantly, is the fact that I happen to be a father of 3 and a grandfather of 9, and 7 of those 9 grandchildren are involved in a variety of stages of the Common Core implementation as it rolls out. So I have a sort of a different perspective relative to that. Let me say, first of all, that one of the things that I wanted to do with my comments, and I'm conscious of time for both Sue Tower and I, is to first indicate that the work that you do relative to textbook analysis is both important and respected. I don't have to tell you that other states could and should have the courage to do what the state of Tennessee does. And for those of you who are unaware, that there are lots of states where that work isn't done. I also recognize that in these times, with this implementation, that this landscape relative to assessing a different look at standards is tricky. And so I'd like to consider yourselves as trailblazers relative to that. There are at least 4 assessment systems out there that some states and school districts are considering as they do this work, and there are others that individual school districts have created and so forth. So your undertaking is, if you will, out there for others to take a good watch and learn from. So again, from that perspective, really appreciate and respect what you're in the process of doing and to some extent have done. So with regard to particularly the things that are most important to you as you consider textbooks, the issue of focus is really important. And, I'm not going to personally take credit for focus when serving as president of the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, but we did in fact create the focal points. And at that time, and some of you who are school-based know this, every state in the country had curriculums. Every state had standards. And I can remember vividly in our boardroom in Reston, Virginia, having all of those piled, if you will, across a table. And some states had 32 standards, and some states had over 100. So the notion of focus was the issue here. The notion of, frankly, what's important at particular grade levels was work that actually drove, that initiative. In fact, when we define focus is an emphasis on a small number of key areas of emphasis where students gain extended experience with core concepts and skills. Such experience can facilitate deep understanding, mathematical fluency, and the ability to generalize. So when you look at when any commission looks at focus, it's really important to sort of think about that. That was also picked up when we did our work with the National Math Advisory Panel, where in one of their major recommendations, and this cuts across 2 of the must-haves, if you will, for the analysis that you're doing. And the main finding and recommendation of the National Math Advisory Panel report was a focused, coherent progression of mathematics learning with an emphasis on proficiency with key topics should become the norm in elementary and middle school mathematics in this country. Any approach that continually revisits topics year after year without closure is to be avoided. The National Math Advisory Panel goes on to define coherence, which I'll come to in a moment. But the work of these 2 documents, now one being close to 8 years old, the other one now being close to 6 years old, really helps define, frankly, the work of the Common Core state standards, which some could argue got initiated with the focal points and the National Math Advisory Panel report. It wasn't until those events that people began to take this issue of less is more very seriously. Kind of move into focus, which comes into the IMAT evaluation system that you use sort of pulls together both focus and coherence as certainly must have within a report. I mean, my common consideration of coherence is probably a quote that you've heard from Bill Schmidt, who has done lots of work internationally with regard to both math and science instruction, and specifically with regard to mathematics. He referred to then, far less so now, as the math curriculum in this country being a mile wide and an inch deep. Because frankly, when you have 104 standards, no teacher, however their training and capacity, can do that and do that well. So this notion of coherence was really important to him and his work internationally. And then similarly, the Chief Council of State School Officers, which, as you know, is largely responsible for the work that became the Common Core, talk about coherence and raise a very important point, and I'm quoting here. When people talk about coherence, they often talk about making connections between topics. The most important connections are vertical. That means within a grade. The links from one grade to the next that allow students to progress in their mathematics education. That is why it is critical to think across grades as well and examine the progressions in the standards. So this notion of coherence, if you will, has two directions. It's coherence within that particular grade line with regard to major topics, and it's also whoops, I knew that was going to happen. It also takes those topics and spreads them across as well. I was sitting there thinking, there's no way I can handle both the computer up here and this stuff, so I just proved that. Focus and coherence in comparison to, within the context of focus and coherence and rigor, are more understood, more grounded in terms of research and experience than the third aspect that I'm going to talk about in a minute here, and that's the issue about rigor. Rigor's trickiest, and hence the recent change in the IMET to move rigor from a non-negotiable to an alignment criterion, comparing it with balance. When I think about rigor as a math educator, and I talk about that specifically to mathematicians, they think, well, that means it's hard. That's not exactly what's meant here. Rigor actually is not contained as a word within the Common Core state standards. It is defined, it is discussed in terms of the criteria from the Chief Counsel's K through 8 publishers' criteria. But it, too, is not defined in that particular setting. In fact, it says, to help students meet the expectation of the standards, educators will need to pursue with equal intensity 3 aspects of rigor in the major work of each grade. So there are 2 key concepts there. One is that rigor isn't defined, it's sort of indirectly defined as those aspects are presented, which I'll respond to in a minute. And then the second point, which is also pretty critical, and that is within the major work of each grade. So it's not with everything across the grade level, but within that major work that makes it really important. So the issues being, of course, conceptual understanding, procedural skill and fluency, and applications. Linda Gojak, who was the past president of the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics, most recent past president, did a column as a president. It's, what's all this talk about rigor? Where she basically tries to define herself and says some things that I've just said. Rigor's not mentioned in the Common Core, and yet we know it's very important. So how do we get, if you will, our heads around that? And she tries to do that with regard to her work with teachers. But in terms of the publisher's criteria, it's defined as indicated as conceptual understanding. What to do about procedural skill and fluency. And it's interesting how fluency, if we talk about fluency, we can actually break apart fluency, because as you look at fluency, you review that as how kids do with what I might refer to as addition and related subtraction facts, and similarly multiplication and related division facts, i.e. fact fluency. But we're also interested in procedural fluency, that is how they do with the skills about how to add multi-digit numbers or subtract or multiply and divide. So it has similar but kind of different connotations there, which I think is pretty important. In fact, IMET uses the phrase fluencies and procedural skills to perhaps draw that distinctions. The applications part is, to some extent, at least my sense is that it's harder to assess than one might think, because it's frankly more than a really neat task or problem that a kid might encounter. It's consistency. It's connecting the mathematics, its relevance across that mathematics and across, again, those major topics across a grade. So I want to take a step back and indicate to you that rigor is a challenge, and it's tricky. Defining it, knowing what it is when you see it, And it may not, in fact, be as important to you as conceptual understanding and fluency, particularly at levels K through 8. But it's still very important if we think about this set of standards, and I believe that because I live it every day, as a set of standards that has the potential to prepare students for careers and or be college ready. So that rigor, that sort of, is it challenging enough? Are opportunities there on a regular basis to challenge must be defined, understood, and then assessed. Finally, I have another issue for you, and this is really beyond your task, but it's teacher content and pedagogical background and rigor and focus and coherence. My sense is that there must be a partnership here, that no school district or state department can do all of this and single-handedly, and we have to recognize that relationships between those who prepare and provide the materials, first of all, cannot be adversarial, but must be indeed a partnership in terms of, if you will, solving these very complex problems together. Recognizing, by the way, you know, I've known this gentleman, Phil Hester. We both had hair when we knew each other, and so the notion of tension between those people who prepare materials and yet doing that in the best name of kids, I think, is very important. And so I think, you know, that tension also is extended to schools and school districts as well in terms of doing what's right every day for student learning. So I want to thank you very much for what you do in Tennessee for mathematics education, because what you're doing really extends beyond these state borders, and for your very careful consideration for this appeal, particularly with regard to the issue of rigor. Thank you.
It's about 4 minutes remaining, Phil.
Any particular questions from the commission relative to the Envision Math reviews? In your folder on the right-hand side is actually a copy of the reviews. Did you want to speak about that now, or you want to do it in the second part? Okay. What we did in your folder, so you can have this to refer back to over the next couple of weeks, you'll see a copy of our final review on the right-hand side for grades K through 2. Then you'll see a copy of the final committee review for grades 3 through 6. And then you'll see the final reviews for Algebra 1, 2, Geometry, and Integrated Math 1, 2, and 3. On the left-hand side, that Dr. Tower will address in the next session, the last document on the back was the original scoring instrument that the teacher reviewers were trained on, where it had focus and rigor both listed as non-negotiable items. As I mentioned previously, in August of this year, Student Achievement Partners, the organization that trained the teacher reviewers and developed the original rubric based upon input nationwide from math educators and teachers, clearly defined in public and on a public webcast that rigor should no longer be a non-negotiable, that it was important, but it was totally subjective, totally open to interpretation. Different people could have different perspectives of what rigor truly is. So we just wanted you to have all of these documents as you do your due diligence and your work over the next couple of weeks. Dr. Hammond, questions?
Any questions from any of the commission members? All right, thank you.
And we'll just take just a minute, and then we'll start the second session. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In the second part of our presentation.
Hang on 1 second, Phil. We do have a question.
Yes, sir.
Recognize you now.
All right. My question for you just is, and I think you mentioned it being the final review, though the copies here, are these are after you had opportunity to revise, these are the final after that? Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right.
What we did, and Mr. Wilson has very eloquently outlined the process and the chronology. On the left-hand side of your folder, you'll see a 3-page handout called Overview and Background. We also have reviewed the process every step of the way, what we did along the way. We take very seriously what the teacher reviewers said. And between, as he mentioned earlier, we only had 4 weeks. We were only given a time frame of 4 weeks to make factual changes, enhance content, and in the elementary perspective, actually added 32 pages of brand new content specifically on procedural fluency, what the committee had asked us to do. The K2 committee thought that that was more than enough. They passed us. The 3-6 committee said that in their opinion, they thought because of the rigor metric, the rigor aspect of it, that perhaps still could need some more work. But yes, sir, Mr. Conkus, the reviews you have there are the final reviews after we did the resubmission. I'm going to let Dr. Tower do the second part of our presentation, if that's okay. She's going to focus on the process and what we did, how we developed the content, how we developed the additional content, both from an elementary perspective and also from a high school perspective. Did extensive work also at the high school level on every book, all 6 books, Algebra 1, 2, Geometry, and Integrated Courses 1, 2, and 3. Dr. Tower.
Dr. Tower,
Yes.
If you'll just state your name and your organization. You have 30 minutes
Okay,
to
great.
speak. And
Thank you. My name is Susan Tower, and I work for Pearson Education, and we have the imprints of Scott Forsman, Addison Wesley, which is the Envision Math series, and we also have at the secondary level Prentice Hall as our high school series. Okay, thank you. And thank you again for the opportunity to speak to you today. I want to reiterate what Dr. Fennell mentioned earlier, that we, Tennessee, at least from our perspective in the publishing community, is always seen as sort of a beacon of innovation in terms of its focus on education. And that was clear from the revised standards that you came out with in 2010 that were much more rigorous than the previous ones. And then when the Common Core the Common Core standards were released, Tennessee was among the first to adopt those and really have a strong focus on training its teachers to understand the Common Core state standards and to be able to teach to them well. So we, as Dr. Fennell mentioned, we applaud the work that Tennessee has done in training its teachers and improving math education, and clearly the results that you've had with the NAEP scores over the past 3 years have been an indicator that you've been successful in helping your teachers teach better and students are learning math better. So we congratulate you. Also, the commitment to education that you have is evident in the desire to accelerate the math adoption. So I think your last math adoption was 2010. For 6 years, but the decision was made that you wanted to accelerate it to make sure that students had appropriate material. So all of these things are really indicative of the commitment that you have to education. And it was clear that you wanted to have an instrument that would be that would help to identify high quality materials. So you reached out to Student Achievement Partners, which is a group that has done a lot of work around the Common Core state standards. Some of its members are, like Dr. Fennell, have worked to develop the standards, so they do have a strong knowledge. They were the group that led the development of the publisher's criteria that was released in 2013. Right, Skip? And from that, so that was just sort of a list of criteria, and from that they developed this instructional materials evaluation toolkit, which Dr. Fennell mentioned, which is, it's more of a rubric type of thing. It made it easier for people to use. And so when you look at the rubric that they developed, they originally had 4 non-negotiables. So there was focus on major work, focus in K-8, rigor and balance, and then practice and content. And So the screening instrument that Tennessee used was sort of a condensed version. You had two non-negotiables, focus and rigor. So, and then, you know, we found that the process was very transparent. I was here at the January meeting where the publishers were presented with the tool that was going to be used. So the process for us was transparent along the way. We were told what we needed to do when things were due and everything. So we applaud that transparency and the commitment to work with publishers that we found. I think one of the things that Skip mentioned that is worth noting is that the Student Achievement Partners is interested in research. They released the IMET first in 2013, and then they've been working with different school districts and different states, just as they've worked with you, to sort of see how well this rubric is working. So that was one of their concerns. How well is this helping school districts to identify high-quality materials for their school districts? And so it was at the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics annual conference in April of 2014 that they announced, the Student Achievement Partners announced that they were revising the IMET. And at that session, they didn't give a lot of information about how they were revising it, but they said based on their work with school districts that they were revising the IMET. And originally they hoped to have it out in June, but it wasn't released until August of 2014. And so you do have a copy of the revised IMET here. You have to have your reading glasses. I apologize for that. But one of the most interesting and change to that IMET was that they reduced the number of non-negotiables from 4 to 2. So that was one. And the second part to that is the non-negotiables are now just focus and coherence. So what they, and if you look on the second, it's actually page 7, but it's like the second. This one, it explains why they kept the non-negotiables as focus and coherence, because they said when you look at the Common Core, the two basic evidence-based principles of the Common Core state standards are focus and coherence, just as Dr. Fennell was explaining earlier. That and so they wanted to maintain the focus on focus. So making sure that school districts understood that focus and coherence is what the Common Core Standards is all about. It's like making sure that students have the opportunity to go in depth to understand concepts and that they can see the progression of concepts across, all with the goal of making students ready for algebra. So that's the main goal. And one of the reasons, so there have been a number of webinars. I was able to sit on one webinar from the School Achievement Partners to explain the reasons why they made this change to the IMET. And they said that in their work with school districts, with different states, with different teachers evaluating curriculum materials, they found that there was a great variety of interpretation, great variability of interpretation as to what constitutes rigor. And so they thought that that was sort of compromising in some way the non-negotiable, that people had very different understandings of rigor, so there was this unreliability of that part. So they thought that rigor should be more of a local school district decision rather than making it a non-negotiable. So that was their reasoning for that in all of their work they were finding this. And so when you look at some of the language of the rigor metrics too, you'll see that there is, so for example, the criterion C says the development of procedural fluency is robust for those standards that set explicit expectations for fluency. So robustness is sort of how do you define robustness? What constitutes robustness for you or for me? So those are the kinds of variabilities that they were encountering as they talked to different school districts that had used that rubric. So that's what they recommend. They moved it out, and they said that school districts should decide what they think constitutes robustness. So in light of all that, in light of all of the work that the Tennessee reviewers have done, the work that the Textbook Commission, the work that the Tennessee Department of Education has done in trying to ensure that Tennessee students have the best quality material, Pearson would respectfully request that the Textbook Commission consider a revision to the screening tool that you all used and moving rigor out of the non-negotiable into the alignment criteria. So keeping, just as the IMET has done, Student Achievement Department, keeping as the non-negotiable the focus criteria, and then moving the rigor into the alignment criteria, which would be the second part of the tool. That would allow school districts to look at the programs that have met the focus criterion and to decide, you know, what would constitute a rigorous curriculum for their particular school districts. Okay. Any questions? Sorry. I don't think I've met my 30 minutes yet.
You mentioned that IMET still recognizes that local school districts should evaluate the book for rigor.
Correct.
In selecting.
Correct.
School districts should define robustness. That's the way they put it.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Any commission members? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
How much time we have left?
Ms. Hester? How much time? Did you already wipe out the time?
I did, but I can.
What was that?
So we have 20 minutes.
Okay, you have 20 minutes left.
I'm not going to take 20. I promise.
We'll start.
Just a couple of closing comments.
If you would, for 1 second, Ms. Chester, come on in. Jason, welcome. Jason's been on the road this morning and has been participating via telephone, so glad you're finally here. Okay. Mr. Hester.
Thanks, Dr. Hammer. Just a couple of closing comments. As I started the presentation with, and I'll end it with this, we do take very seriously what we do. We value the work of the Commission. We certainly value the work of the State Department. And most importantly, I certainly appreciate the work of the classroom teachers across the state of Tennessee. The programs that you're looking at today from Pearson, in Tennessee currently, in grades K through 6, over 94% of the students are using Envision Math for the last 3 years. 3 consecutive years in a row, math test scores have increased significantly. First time in 30 years in the state of Tennessee we've had that type of improvement in math scores. A lot of that is because of good teaching that's going on and good teacher training that's going on at the State Department level. But we would also like to think that a lot of that is the way that this program is developed, both to challenge students, both to teach them to think critically and to apply what they've learned to be college and career ready to prepare for the future. We have very strong efficacy. 2 of your other larger states in the country have just gone through math campaigns this spring, Texas and California. Both states overwhelmingly approved both of these programs at the state level, and both states will do over a 50% market share with Envision Math in both of those. We have very strong efficacy scores from about 20 different states across the nation that have adopted this program in the last 2 years that show that the program truly does work. As Dr. Barton said this morning, she felt like that the number one criteria that the teachers were charged with to evaluate programs was, do they match the Common Core standards, which is your focus metric in Part 1 of the non-negotiable instrument you used. It's documented by your teacher review committees. We did have a 100% match on every single book that we submitted in grades K through 12. In Envision Math, at every grade level, K6, a 100% match to the standards. In Algebra 1-2 Geometry and in Integrated 1-2-3, a 100% content match standards. The only thing that the reviewers commented on was certain aspects of the rigor metric. And not to repeat what Dr. Tower and Dr. Fennell have said, nationwide, teachers are now responding back once they've used the initial IMET instrument that rigor is very subjective. It really is open to interpretation, and they admitted it publicly on their national webcast 3 weeks ago that they felt like that should be left to the local districts to decide really what rigor means for that. We respectfully request that as you do your due diligence the next couple of weeks, we've given you our summary report. We really want to continue to work with the schools in Tennessee to improve student performance and to prepare these students for the future. And we respectfully request that you take a very strong look at the rigor metric that's on your current evaluation instrument. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you.
Next, representative from McGraw-Hill.
Since we're both have a schedule, will the technology supposed to come down, and I believe that's the gentleman.
We will wait, since we are a little ahead of schedule, for you to get your technology set up.
Get somebody to.
Put the clicker. You said there was one here. You showed it to me this morning.
Here it is.
And then, do you have Ms. Winston?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll call somebody.
Thank you.
Hey, can you put the screens down?
You have to leave till we make sure everything's working right. Mm-hmm. Work this morning. Do we have to do FM?
Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of these.
Yeah, there we go. Need to go duplicate.
Whoops.
There we go.
Hold on, that's not. Oh, you're good. Okay.
Okay, we're going to continue with McGraw-Hill. If each speaker within this time frame would identify yourself and your organization. You have 25 minutes. It'll begin now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hammond. My name is Jeff Livingston. I'm Senior Vice President of Education Policy for McGraw-Hill Education. As you all know, for 125 years, McGraw-Hill has been involved in the process of creating and distributing materials for American classrooms, and for most of that time, we've been doing it in Tennessee. This is a long-term partnership between our company and your school systems, and that long-term partnership has resulted in a deep respect for your process, and most particularly for the very hard work that your reviewers do. Therefore, we don't take this step lightly. We have no illusions about how great is the step that we are asking you to take in disregarding some of the recommendation of your reviewers. If we had simply failed to meet your standards, then I would be having a difficult conversation with our product development people. If we had made a decision pedagogically that went contrary to what the state of Tennessee had decided was important for your state, then we probably wouldn't have submitted at all. The reality is that I'm here today because we see this process as a hugely important strategic issue for McGraw-Hill Education, for the industry of the provision of curriculum materials, and for everybody who's involved in any way with the process of teaching and learning in the state of Tennessee. This huge and frankly unprecedented step on our part is made necessary by the fact that a major state is about to come extremely close to suggesting that the only way to meet your standards is to do so in printed form. In this era, when we are all looking for ways to better prepare our students for college and for career, we think that's the wrong statement to make. The core question here is, does McGraw-Hill My Math meet the TN core standards? My answer to that question is yes, it does, but only if you consider all of the resources that we have made available to the state of Tennessee. Because you see, if we had been here 20 years ago, I could hand out student editions that were labeled, and you could see in the printed student edition everything you were looking for. That's not the way the program that we have submitted this year works. We have developed a brand new program that we designed to be a good balance between printed resources and resources that were made available online as digital resources. When the state of Tennessee, when this commission says this program does not meet standards, that should mean something. What it should not mean is this program does not meet standards in the way that it used to, in the places that we are used to seeing them. I humbly submit that if McGraw-Hill Education got the balance wrong between print materials and digital materials, that this commission should allow the districts in the state of Tennessee to tell us so. I am under no illusions. I know that there are districts in this state, just as there are all over the country, who are still struggling even to get printed materials in the hands of every student. But at the same time, there are districts like Unicoi or Metro Nashville that are joining the most forward-leaning districts in the country and trying to go all digital. We believe very strongly that this commission should allow those districts the choice to choose a program that has leaned a little more heavily on the digital resources than on the print. As I personally read through some of the comments that your reviewers submitted about the thousands of resources that we have prepared for this program, one of them really stuck with me. One of your reviewers suggested that more of our materials should be in print form because online materials were merely supplemental. Now, it seems to me that online learning is not supplemental at the University of Tennessee. Online learning is not supplemental at Jackson State Community College. Online resources are not supplemental to the jobs that companies like FedEx and Eastman Chemical are bringing to Tennessee. And I would humbly submit that resources that are provided online should not be considered supplemental to the education of elementary school age students in this country, in this state, either. Finally, I want to be very, very sure that I don't leave the impression with you all that I and my colleagues have done our own review of the program, looked at the review that your review committee did, and have determined that we suspect they didn't spend as much time online as they might have in order to get a full picture of the program. One of the realities of digital resources is that we know when people log on to our digital resources. We know where they go. We know how long they stay. So I don't stand here in fear of contradiction when I say to you that this process that got us to this point did not involve adequate review of the online resources made available for the MyMath program. Again, this is strategically important for the whole industry and the whole country. Right now, as I speak, there are students all over the country, from North Carolina and South Carolina to California and many, many others, who are using MyMath successfully to meet the very same college and career readiness standards that Tennessee has adopted. Please use your power, your authority, to ensure that the students of Tennessee have at least the opportunity for their districts to decide to take a step in a more digital direction and meet the standards in a fully print and digital way. Now, my colleague, Beth Miner, is going to come up and walk you through a couple of the things, just a few, because we only have a little bit of time, of the things that reviewers might have seen if this process had been slightly more digital. If Beth will come forward and show you these things, then I'll come back in and we'll be very happy to address any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. My name is Beth Miner. I am the Senior National Curriculum Specialist for Mathematics Grades K-5 at McGraw-Hill. And it's my pleasure to stand in front of you today with that position, but even more importantly, it's my pleasure to stand in front of you as a veteran of the classroom. I taught for more than 25 years. So I know the task that your reviewers had, and I know much of what goes on in those classrooms at K-5. So I will share with you much through the digital assets and resources that Jeff outlined for you, some of the points that were made in the review process. First of all, as we conclude today, you'll receive this booklet that you see on the screen. I'm doing this through a strands trace of fractions from grades K-5, and I chose that because your reviewers cited fractions as one of the areas that they would wish to see more. I also am going to show you on screen print and digital tools and the complement and the balance that they have together in the McGraw-Hill My Math program. When we look at the focus metric, and there are six that I'll point out to you that your reviewers used. And this one, in any grade, materials are designed so teachers and students spend the large majority of time on the major work of the standard. And the grade, this was cited by your reviewers as something that they felt McGraw-Hill My Math needed. So I want to cite from the Common Core. If you'll notice here, continually returning to organizing principles. Now, what does that mean? It means that not just do we come back to fractions, perhaps, again, going to that, through fractions, but we will make those all-important connections to instructional focus in every single grade level, which might mean that you'll look at standards outside of fractions, because you and I know we need these logical connections. I'm taking this from our online tools. This is called Contents in Brief. It's at every single grade level. This is 4th grade. Look at the red arrows. There will be 6 chapters devoted to number and operation in base 10, and an additional 3 for a total of 9 chapters devoted to number and operation and fractions. Now think back to that statement about focus areas and key areas of focus and the major standards in a grade level. And look at how we outline this for every teacher on page 6 of his or her materials. And going back again to that issue about meeting the fraction standards, I've pulled this from our targeted lessons that are, again, an online and a digital tool. We're in Chapter 8 that you just saw on the screen. Look at the fraction standards for NF1 and for NF2. Now, your reviewers cited that they only saw 6 days of lessons. Yes, if you only look at print. 3 of 14 chapters are devoted to fractions. What about the additional lessons again? What about the review online? Look at the emphasis on those very fractions that they cited. As we continue, look at the targeted activities. These are whole lessons where when we look at Chapter 9, yet again, more lessons devoted to this targeted and specific fraction standard that was noted by your reviewers. And then in Chapter 10, yet again, for a total of 23 additional lessons. All of them were online. All of them targeted specific standards. So my question is, were all of the assets shown that would have been reflected in the review? So I went online to look. I went into our resources, and I pulled up fractions in just the 4th grade. And I'd like you to look on the screen at the sheer number of resources that might be missed if you didn't look, again, at the digital tools and assets provided through McGraw-Hill My Math. So I'm thinking about, again, those 2 standards that were specifically cited in the 4th grade, and I see 23 personal tutors for children. There are 13 interactive whiteboard-ready presentations pre-built for instruction. Geometer Sketchpad, one of the nation's leading online resources and tools, is a McGraw-Hill product embedded within fractions, whole lessons, and then engaging activities for Tennessee students. And finally, project-based learning. So important to delivering those important application skills that you've already heard about. Again, notice the targeted standards in project-based learning. Where are they? They're in our digital tools. What are they? Full and complete lessons targeting the very standards that reviewers mentioned. Was this seen? Was this evaluated? That's my question to you. So I'll continue on in the focus metric. I want to compliment, again, your reviewers for their thoroughness, but I want you to look at K2 and just what was said about topics from earlier grades supporting grade level work. Let's look at kindergarten. Count to 100 by ones, count by 10. So logical. Yet if you look in the red bubble, and I defined the red bubble as showing you what your reviewers said, and then the very evidence that I want to pull out for you, demonstrating that indeed we do meet this criteria. Misunderstanding, specifically in taking apart and decomposing. So we build strong number sense, and then we're going to make numbers, compose, then we're going to take them apart, we're going to decompose. And that's going on in kindergarten. Move to 1st grade, now 10 more, 10 less. You're making logical progressions. Remember that, returning to those key ideas. We'll take them into writing about it, articulating that strategy, and higher order thinking. Still focused around building that prior knowledge. The standards at each grade level are such they build on prior grade levels. And we do that so clearly, so visually in our print and our online tools. A reviewer noted that opportunities are limited for procedural fluency. But when I looked through the K1-2 materials, I clearly found on my own a strategy of beginning with a greater number Doing it again connected to manipulatives. Let's take them into doubles and making tens. Can you see the progression? Can you see that there are not limited opportunities, there are a multitude of opportunities where procedural fluency is indeed built? Where do teachers know this happens? When you look at the screen, you see I've taken this from Ed Digital Tools, which is the teacher's edition, as well as in print. What's the math in this chapter? What do teachers know? Well, one of your reviewers cited that lessons devote a greater amount of time to prior grade level work than's necessary. But what about the progressions? What about that connection? Let's look at what this page tells you. First of all, I have circle. What are your students bringing in? They're bringing in prior knowledge. What were the standards they covered before this particular chapter? They're right there. Then, of course, in the red box, here's what you'll teach in the 4th grade. And we take it a step further, and we show you what they'll do next and which standards will be done next. So, again, I go back to, was this missed? Was this seen? Because it's a clear pathway into that instructional focus. It's a clear pathway into making sure that what's done prior to this is covered well so that students are prepared for the standards that are coming. When we look at vocabulary and the use of standards vocabulary and modeling to build fraction concepts, even in K2, and then again, those equal parts. But I want you to notice the little purple square or rectangle in the upper corner. This is in geometry, but notice what students are doing in 1st grade. They're going to explore and explain it to equal parts. They're going to do it on their own. They're going to take it home and take it into their Tennessee home so that parents and child care providers know what's happening in that classroom. And it's all centered not in fractions but in geometry. Remember the logical connections so that students see the big ideas. Exploration, alternative strategies, and defining what is equal. This was what your reviewers were looking for. And again, did they go online and did they see this happening? If you move into that rigor metric, the 3 aspects of rigor you've already heard from. You've heard about conceptual understanding, procedural skill, and fluency in application. But when I look at problem solving, the articulation of a strategy and explaining your reasoning, this is what your reviewers were looking for. Did they see these? These are higher order thinking problems. Not let's do it this way, it's how would you do it? Can you tell me why you do it that way? And can you explain what happens if all the sizes are different? This is complex, and this is why we need to use those digital tools and resources in combination with the print. Partitioning, 1st grade. Think about that. This is new to 1st grade teachers, partitioning, and then attempting to do it on your own. And we're looking at alternative strategies, methodologies, and teaching through geometry and making connections across those domains. So what did I show you in K and 2? I showed you what your reviewers were looking for. Materials designed to support grade level work with strong foundation. High quality questioning and problems that are embedded not just in the print, but in the digital tools as well. A variety of problems, you saw that, enabling students to connect their math ideas and transfer understanding and ultimately the real world connections, which involves cutting up a pizza. Those are the things your reviewers look for. But did they look at the digital tools? Because everything you just saw, I took from online. Everything you just saw is editable, customizable, and printable for your teachers in Tennessee. I want to move up and stay inside that fraction trace. And as we look up, I want you to notice one way and another way. One of the reviewers cited, practice often presented with one kind of representation. Did they see one way and now another way? And when we look at the independent practice, the opportunity to use it in different representations as well. And then, of course, the 3rd grade looking at rigor and the why. Why is the math like this? Why? And demonstrate and answer the question. This is what we do in McGraw-Hill My Math. Again, when we look again at fractions, high quality problems inviting exploration and connections. What about talk math? Was that seen? The opportunity to articulate strategies, because that's a part of the practice standards as well. This is what 21st century classrooms are doing. And then again, taking us back into partitioning, which they did in 1st grade, and now they'll do it in 3rd grade as well. Foundational work. That's what we're looking for. Hands-on, fractions through this time, measurement. Have you seen how you've embedded that instructional focus, but not isolating yourself to a single set of standards, but looking across the entire grade level? When you look at grades 3, 4, and 5, in print, there are 73 lessons defined as focus on fractions. Online, there are an additional 96 full lessons on fractions for a total of over 500 digital tools and resources complementing print and online teaching and instruction as well. So when I continue in the metric of rigor, your evaluators were looking for procedural fluency as being robust. And I've heard conversation about that and how subjective that can be. But we can clearly show you in McGraw-Hill My Math through fractions just how robust this can be. Multiplying fractions as whole numbers, practice, practice. Because we know that students need to do this for ultimately the application. Ongoing opportunity embedded throughout the program and a balance of print and online tools. And I mentioned Geometry Sketchpad and notice the interaction and the dynamic use of fraction circles. Again, going back to representation, not just fraction strips, not just fraction number lines, but also the use of alternatives in animations through digital. And in that rigor metric, yet one more time, the apply, which so naturally follows the procedural skill and fluency. Let's look at it. Through project-based learning, whole new lessons devoted to fraction standards, alternative strategies and scaffolding, and ultimately all the tools that a child would need in this lesson. At your fingertips, how? Through your digital tools and resources. And then, of course, vocabulary was mentioned repeatedly, you know, as where's the vocabulary? Here it is. It's in every chapter. It's in print. It's online. It's in cards. It's in a word wall. It's all over our online tools and resources as well as print. And the opportunity to use a graphic tool called a foldable in every grade level K to 5, because research shows that this engaging graphic tool means long-term retention. And then, of course, let's not discount the importance of gameplay. So much research is being done now on the interactivity of gameplay, what it does, not just, of course, for procedural skill and fluency and the maintenance and mastery of basic facts, but the application of mathematics. It's there. It's in every single grade level. And a unique feature in McGraw-Hill My Math is the real-world problem-solving reader. And I show you just one. They're leveled for reading fluency. They're online. They're in print. And they take the world of mathematics into the world that a child lives in every single grade level. And, of course, it interests them, the moon gazing. How does that relate to mathematics? The high-quality problems will invite exploration. You've seen so much already that's engaging. But when we look at a McGraw-Hill My Math lesson through the teacher perspective, explore, model, and extend in every single lesson as the teacher plans, and investigate the math, digging through the conceptual development and how to use the explore, model, and defend, and extend the concepts and skills that these students are learning in the classroom, so that Tennessee teachers are prepared for this kind of mathematics with the tools they're provided as educators. And a variety of conceptual problems are embedded in these easy-to-use lessons. When I go to real world, again, you see the real vocabulary.
You have 2 minutes left.
Okay. The real vocabulary, but look at the use of coins and currency within their own system. So, in closing, we want to be sure that you know there are hands-on lessons. We want to be sure that you see in every lesson the opportunity to apply it. On the left-hand side of the folder we'll give you, you'll see the publisher's criteria completely filled out. You'll see our answers to TN Core, and you'll also see this trace. And I'd like to give it back to Jeff now.
Thank you, Beth. I know we have very little time, so let me sum up by saying that, you know, there's a reason that this commission doesn't choose just one program for per subject area and say to the districts of this state, thou shalt use this one. The districts in Tennessee are too diverse for that. They're in different places in curriculum, different places in a lot of ways. I would suggest that the last time Tennessee adopted a K-5 mathematics program, Tennessee was less ready for the fully digital experience that you can have now. And by the next time, nearly every district in the state will surely be ready. Please don't decide today at the state level that no district in this state has the right to choose a program that decides to put some of its resources made available to teachers, to students, to parents online. Please don't make our decision to go as digital as we ever have in a Tennessee adoption. Please don't make that the same thing as suggesting that we have not met the standards. Let the local school districts, please, Let the local school districts tell us if they can't use it online. Tell us if they would prefer a different balance. Please leave that to the local school districts and go against the recommendation of your committee. We stand ready to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Livingston. Any questions from commission members?
So we have brought some materials that go into a much more depth than we were able to here, so that you can, over the next couple of weeks, take a look at the traces that we have done, what you would have seen had you been able to access all of the resources we made available to your review committee.
Okay, Chair recognizes Mr. Conkus.
Just a couple questions for clarity, if you don't mind. What I understood you to say was that your digital format is part of your curriculum that you're handing out, and in doing so, my first question is: this digital format, is it completely online, or is it also available with like CDs and things like that they can put on a computer, or is it just online access? That's my first question for you.
McGraw-Hill My Math is a balance between printed resources and resources that are available online using the internet.
Okay. All right, thank you. And then my second question to follow up with that is, are you then saying that the digital format, the digital part of the curriculum is a required part of the curriculum along with the textbook, or should the textbook be able to stand alone?
I'm saying that the best experience available to users of My Math is a combination of print and online. We are fully aware that not every district is able to access all of the online features, but for those that are, by far the superior experience is a combination of print and digital resources.
Okay, and finally, and I think I know this answer, but I was just going to ask, again for clarity, are these resources included in, if a district were to purchase this curriculum from you, those online resources, are they included in that
Absolutely.
price, or are they?
They are absolutely part and parcel of the program. They are available to anyone who adopts the program in every case, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions, Mr.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Livingston? Thank you, sir.
Thank you all for your consideration.
Last presentation, number 8 on the agenda, is math textbook review process. We have a state advisory panelist with us today to speak to that experience, Karen Vogelsang. I recognize Karen at this time. And when you're ready, Karen, just state who you are and please tell us about your experience.
Okay. My name is Karen Vogelsang. I am an elementary school teacher in Shelby County and one of the members of the textbook review team. And I want to thank you all for allowing me to come and speak on behalf of the K-12 math textbook review team. The work we completed was very rigorous, and we approached our work with a great deal of diligence because the impact that this decision will have on the future of all Tennessee students is so important. Our work began with a very rigorous process to apply to be a part of this team. It included a letter of intent, evidence of student growth, as well as a curriculum alignment exercise. We had to complete a detailed analysis of a math task, and we also had to write a math task that was appropriate for our grade level. This process entailed a lot of work, so the fact that we were selected to be a part of this team, to serve on this committee, we took our work very seriously, and we were committed to the process. Our training began in April with an assignment to read the publisher's criteria and the Tennessee Math Textbook Screening Instrument. This information provided the background that we needed to begin our training in May with the student achievement partners, including team member Jason Zimba. We spent the first 2 days of our training going through a deep dive of the metrics of Section 1. After that training, all of us and I mean all of us, commented about the impact that that training had on us, not just as textbook review team members, but as math teachers. It was also clear after this training that we had a lot of work ahead of us, and it was going to require a lot of detailed, thorough work in going through all of the materials. A week later, we reconvened in Nashville, and we listened to the publishers' presentations, and by the end of that particular day, we all had our assignments, and we used the screening instrument to review the materials. In June, we met again to norm Section 1 and provide our feedback on that metric, and we also had some additional training on Section 2. This training entailed reviewing the materials for alignment criteria for standards for mathematical practice, as well as coherence and usability. Our final meeting was in late August to complete the norming of Section 2. Between June and August, if the publishers had any questions for us, we replied to them. And in the August meeting, publishers also presented the changes that they were suggesting that they would make based on the information that we provided them from Section 1. Our goal throughout this process has been to ensure that the materials met the non-negotiable criteria of Section 1 before it was passed to Section 2, because whatever is approved by the Commission, Tennessee teachers have to have the materials that they need to provide quality instruction so that all students in Tennessee can be successful in math for whatever college and career that they choose. So on behalf of the Tennessee Textbook Math Review Team, I want to say thank you for your time and your consideration of our materials that we submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Those are all the items on our agenda. Other business for the commission includes just a reminder of the October the 6th date, which I believe begins at it's a little bit later start time. Is it 10 a.m. On October the 6th? And that's the beginning of the workshop portion with the regular meeting to follow. Any other business from commission members? Okay, we want to thank everyone for their time, and meeting is adjourned.